We love living in the town of Needham. It's located right near major roads with public transportation to Boston, high-performing schools, a wonderful library, convenient local restaurants, shops, and services, beautiful parks and playing fields, and most important, terrific people. The town is so desirable that lots of folks want to move here, and people who live here want to be able to stay or move back. Unfortunately, it's becoming harder and harder for people to join us in enjoying all the wonderful amenities that we and our families experience here. Why is that? The short answer? Housing costs have skyrocketed. Land is scarce, and throughout our region, supply is low and demand is high. So, the median price for a house in Needham is $1.3 million and climbing. And average rents are well over $2,000 a month. The smaller family homes that were common in Needham just a few years ago are being torn down at a fast pace and replaced by large houses. Many local workers, seniors, young families, and other low and moderate income people simply can't afford to live here. That's why our town created an affordable housing plan working group. We need to provide more housing choice, more options, more types, sizes, and price points to accommodate the kind of socioeconomic diversity on which any town thrives. Townhouses, apartments, and accessory dwelling units could provide affordable options. Historically, the town developed with racially restrictive covenants and economically exclusive lot size requirements that led to our current levels of low economic and racial diversity. It is time to explore how we can remedy the past discrimination and the current decline of housing options so that we can create a sustainable and diverse Needham. It's time to do our share. People use the term affordable housing to mean many different things. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, states that housing is, quote, affordable if housing costs are no more than 30% of household income. They use the term cost burden for those spending more than 30% of income on housing expenses. In Needham, 24%, 1 in 4 of households are cost burdened. That is, their housing is not affordable. AMI stands for Area Median Income, which is calculated for every metropolitan region in the U.S. by HUD. The Area Median Income for Needham for 2022, that is 100% of AMI, is $98,140 for an individual and $140,200 for a family of 4. To put this in context, the average salary for a teacher, firefighter, or retail worker in Needham falls below 100% of AMI, making it very difficult for those who provide valuable services to our residents to live in our town. Low-income or deeply affordable housing refers to housing such as that provided by our Needham Housing Authority and is available to those making approximately 30 to 50% of AMI, who then pay no more than 30% of their income to live in NHA housing or other deeply affordable housing. Under the section of a state law known as 40B, 25% of the units in a multi-unit development must be, quote, affordable. Under this definition, it means affordable to those making 80% of AMI, or 20% of the units offered to those whose incomes are 50% of AMI. Market affordable simply means affordable to workers and households of moderate incomes without any subsidy or restriction. An affordability gap is a gap between current prices to buy or rent and the wealth and income needed to pay those prices. In Needham, based on the $1.3 million median home cost, a 20% down payment, and a 5% rate on a 30-year mortgage, monthly payments on the mortgage alone are over $5,500. That's $66,000 a year, before adding over $12,000 in property taxes and thousands more for utilities, upkeep, improvements, etc. Only those with sizable savings and/or incomes are able to buy into or stay in Needham, given our current lack of housing choice. At the same time, middle-income renters all over Massachusetts are having a hard time paying market rates for a limited number of available apartments. Clearly, there is a sizable affordability gap. Chapter 40B enables local zoning boards of appeal to approve affordable housing developments under flexible rules, if at least 20 to 25% of the units have long-term affordability restrictions. Once a municipality has reached the 10% SHI, that is, affordability requirement, it is no longer required to abide by 40B regulations. You might hear that Needham has met its affordability requirement. That is technically true. Due to recent large housing developments, Needham has exceeded the target set by the state for affordable housing, which is an SHI, or subsidized housing inventory, of 10%. It is critical to note, however, that the actual percentage of affordable homes in Needham is approximately 6.7%. The discrepancy is because for purposes of SHI calculation, all units in a 40B building are counted, including the 75 to 80% of units in the development that are rented at market rates. If the intent is to produce affordable housing, 40B is but one step in the right direction. An accessory dwelling unit, or ADU, is a secondary housing unit on a single-family residential lot. ADU regulations generally regulate where they can be built, who can live in them, whether they require a special permit, and other factors such as maximum size, parking, infrastructure, and egress. The current ADU law in Needham has a number of restrictions. It requires a special permit, which must be renewed every 3 years, for a unit that can be occupied only by specific family members or caregivers, that must be no larger than 850 square feet, and be inside the primary residence and not have the appearance of a second residential unit. There is discussion on our town boards to change some of these requirements, which could produce additional housing units at lower rents and provide needed income for senior homeowners, for example, who might be struggling with rising housing expenses. Zoning began in the U.S. in the early part of the 20th century within the context of racial and ethnic segregation to bring some thoughtful planning to municipalities. Unfortunately, in the middle part of the century, even when express statutory segregation had long been deemed unconstitutional, it was often used to support the racial and economic segregation that we see in so many urban and suburban settings. Inclusionary zoning has a requirement or incentive to reserve a specific percentage of units in new residential development for low or moderate income households. Needham has some inclusionary zoned areas, typically requiring 12.5% of units in new developments of 6 units or more to be sold or rented at prices that are affordable to incomes at or below 80% of AMI standard. Single-family zoning allows for only single-family housing and usually designates the minimum lot size for each dwelling. In 1948, Needham increased the minimum lot size for a single-family dwelling from 7,000 square feet to 10,000 square feet in its single residence B district and created a new single residence A district requiring 1 acre. These changes made it harder for lower-income families to settle in Needham, just when the World War II veterans were ready and able to enter the housing market because of the GI Bill. While the GI Bill did not explicitly exclude African American veterans from its benefits, it was structured in such a way that the 1.2 million returning Black veterans were denied access and were unable to build the generational wealth that white veterans enjoyed. The 1948 change also eliminated some multifamily zoning. Currently, approximately 92% of Needham is single-family zoned. Multifamily zoning in Needham is defined as 3 or more residential units in a building. Under this definition, 2-family buildings and ADUs are not multifamily housing. Mixed-use zoning allows for a combination of residential, commercial, and/or industrial uses in the same building. Density, which refers to the number of units allowed on a given area of land, can affect a number of things. On the one hand, greater density might contribute to increased traffic and more school-aged students. However, it is also true that greater density increases housing availability, housing choices, economic vibrancy, and resident diversity, while also reducing energy consumption. Density enables communities to offer a wide range of housing products at different price points. The MBTA Communities Law is part of a larger 2020 Massachusetts Economic Development Act that amended the State Zoning Act. It requires that MBTA communities, which includes Needham, create at least one zoning district with the following features. The district must allow, not require, multifamily housing at a minimum gross density of 15 units per acre, with permitting as of right, be suitable for families with children and have no age restriction, and be close to a public transportation station. In Needham, zoning created under this regulation must allow for development of 15% of our current housing units, or a total of 1,764 units. 90% of the created zoning district must be within 1/2 mile of public transportation. Zoning will cover from 100 to 120 acres in Needham. The penalty for not complying with this law is the forfeiture of specific funding sources available from the Commonwealth, which sources have provided $3,500,000 to Needham over the past 10 years, and a lost opportunity to create critically needed additional housing units. The Needham Housing Authority currently manages 456 units of low-income, deeply affordable housing in Needham. These are made up of 206 units for senior and disabled individuals, 130 units for families, and 120 Section 8 vouchers. The NHA manages most of the deeply affordable units in Needham. 80% of the units are over 40 years old, almost half over 60 years old, and many of them are in serious disrepair. Due to lack of funding from the federal and state governments, maintenance has been deferred for decades. Obviously, these buildings currently do not provide the quality housing that our town should be or wants to be offering for Needham residents. In the summer of 2021, the NHA engaged the Cambridge Housing Authority as its planning and development consultant and partner. Together, they are implementing a multi-year project to update and expand housing units under the NHA's management. It is called the Modernization and Redevelopment Initiative, or MRI. Funding for this plan will come from many sources, primarily from the federal and state governments. People might ask themselves, will adding more affordable housing reduce the value of my home? Fortunately, research indicates a resounding no. In one review, 13 out of 14 studies that examined the impact of proximity to affordable housing on property values have found no significant negative effect. And most research assumes higher density projects and not the less impactful, integrated, lower density housing Needham will generally pursue. And there is a strong argument that more diverse housing options, and diversity in general, can increase values or at least provide greater pricing stability. Racial diversity has been increasing in Needham, albeit slowly, and property values have skyrocketed. And think of Brookline's wide variety of housing types and a more diverse population, yet its housing prices remain among the highest in the region. Newton also has many more apartment buildings and multifamily development, yet its single-family homes keep appreciating. Needham and the surrounding communities suffer from missing middle housing. Research from the Urban Institute supports that, quote, communities with a broad range of housing types and prices provide another benefit, greater stability in the face of a housing market downturn. Currently, 24% of Needham households are housing cost burdened, and any system that has participants increasingly living on the financial edge puts us all at risk. There is a broader threat to our community. If businesses cannot afford to hire and retain employees locally, they move elsewhere and take the home buyers with them. Building more affordable housing is both morally right and economically sound.